this little talk about yoga philosophy is going to be about the 4 traditional paths of yoga, a journey to cut the identification of body and mind. Now, there are several different paths that can do that. Just like if someone goes to the grocery store, they could walk, they could take a car, they could ride a bike, they could ride a scooter. What the great ancient scholars and sages found is that there were 4 paths to this way of cutting away this identification of the body and the mind. And those are called the 4 traditional paths of yoga. When I speak about this, I do not mean the physical style of yoga, right? The physical asana practice. And it will be interesting because of these 4 traditional paths, only one of them actually has anything about the physical practice at all. And so these 4 traditional paths are divided roughly in half. 2 of them are very austere. And even at the time they were written, these were the people that you would say, man, you are radical. These paths were people who were going to leave the world, not have any association with anyone because they realized, I'm not a body, I'm not a mind, and anything that draws me into that conception is bad. I'm going to cut it off. The other 2 paths are paths that are, I know I'm not a body, I know I'm not a mind, but how can I discover that while living in this world? And the great text, the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna, who narrates it, gives some time to each of these 4 traditional paths, saying that the path of Bhakti Yoga is both the highest and the easiest. So let's look at the 2 more austere paths. One of the austere paths might be a bit of a surprise because it's called Ashtanga Yoga. Now, it's surprising because Ashtanga Yoga, and I'm not talking about the physical style of yoga, but the traditional path of yoga is the one and the only one of these 4 traditional paths that has the physical practice, the practice of asana, which will be discussed in another class. But when you really look at Ashtanga Yoga, we can see that it's actually quite austere. The people that do these yoga practices were to leave their home. They were literally to wear the bark off of trees. They were to mat their hair. They only ate the things that could easily come out of the ground. They would only eat water that they were able to collect. It was a very austere lifestyle. It was not, as one of my teachers says, for ladies and gentlemen of New York. It was a life of intense restriction and regulation. It was, as I said, radical even at the time, and not for everyone back then. What to speak of now. Now, the other really restrictive path is called Jnana Yoga, the living of the life that is very austere, the leaving behind of any family and anything that might tempt the senses and the mind to connecting with the body and the mind instead of going towards the soul. The intense study of sacred texts. I always like to pause at this point. Anybody feel like they want to do those 2 paths? And maybe there are, because certain people are very attracted to that. But for others who could not do these types of austerities, there are 2 other paths of yoga called Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. And the way that I like to explain those 2 paths, again, comes from the way I was taught many years ago. A really wonderful analogy is a parent with a child. And so there might be a child who doesn't clean the room, doesn't do their homework, doesn't behave, and they don't really care. They live a life where it's just me and I don't care what anybody thinks. And they live a life where they feel there's just no consequences. From a yoga perspective, this would be called being V-karmic, living a life where you just don't care, where you're completely selfish and everything's for me. Now, if a child is like that, what will a parent do to get them to do their homework or clean their room? And I know many parents, so don't be ashamed. They do a bit of bribery. They'll say, okay, I'm taking away your phone. I'm taking away your iPad. You can't go out with your friends until you clean your room. And the child gives in. They clean their room. They do their homework. But they only do it to get something back. They're not doing it on their own accord. They're doing it because they want something. Now that is called karma kanda. Kanda is a worldview. It's the worldview of, I will only do so I get back. It's a life of bartering. And in the great text, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna really looks down on that thing because it's not a life of honest giving. One of my teachers says, there is no giving back. There's only giving. But it is a step above being V-karmic because at least now the child understands there's something higher than me and there are consequences. And then maybe one day, and if you're a parent, you hope that day isn't too far away, one day the child comes home and they say, you know what? It's ridiculous that my parents have to chase me to clean my room or do my homework. I'm just going to do it because it's the right thing to do. In fact, it's my duty. They work, and my job is to do my homework. And so the child does the work or cleans the room out of a sense of duty, not because they're getting anything back, because that would be karma kanda, but because it's the right thing to do, and they do not expect anything in return. And that is karma yoga. It is living a life with a sense of duty, that I'm doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm being chased, not because I'm being threatened, because it's the right thing to do. Karma yoga. And then one might ask, well, what's the difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga? Well, we continue with this story. So one day the child again comes home, and now they no longer think, I don't have any consequences, being V-karmic. And they don't think, I'm giving, so I get, that's karma kanda. And they're not even thinking, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do, karma yoga. They think about all the things their parents have done for them, and their hearts fill with love. And out of love, they act. Out of love, they clean the room, or do the homework, or make the dinner. It is out of love that they do their actions, and their actions are dedicated to the parents. And that is bhakti yoga. It's out of love I act. Out of love, I want to give, and I want to continue to give. And so when we look at these 4 different paths of yoga, we find them all in that great text, the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is basically divided into 3 sections. And Lord Krishna is talking to his friend, his cousin Arjuna, who has a dilemma. Arjuna's heart is pulled apart because he does not know what to do, but he does know that yoga can be the answer. And to Arjuna, he thinks that the very austere people that he's seen in the woods are the only way to be a yogi, the people in the path of Ashtanga Yoga or Jnana Yoga. But like I said, those are very austere. And Krishna says, no, maybe those aren't for you. But he lays out this whole menu of these 4 different paths. The first third of the Bhagavad Gita is really, in a way, dedicated to a lot of tenets of karma yoga, of this life of duty, of doing the right thing, with no expectation of anything in return. The middle section is really dedicated to Bhakti Yoga. This is giving because there's love. But the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is interesting because that is a chapter that's very much dedicated to Ashtanga Yoga. And then the last third of the Bhagavad Gita is dedicated to concepts in Jnana Yoga. And is also really an unpacking of things that are in the first 2 sections. It contains a lot of wisdom concepts that help one move more from the outer world to the inner. So it's Ashtanga, Gyan, Karma, and Bhakti Yoga. 2 paths are very austere. 2 paths are ones that we can walk in the world. All 4 paths walk us away from the identification with the body and the mind and a reunion with our inner selves. Thanks so much for listening.